Hello, this is going to be week 24, page 1 and 2. So what we're looking to do here is this. We're going to factor our trinomials, and then after we factor, we're going to be solving for our x-intercepts using that zero product property. Now, on all these here today, they are not going to have a greatest common factor, which means we won't need to look at any of these polynomials here and try to divide them all by a number first, right? We won't have to do that. There's no GCFs. All right, so what we are going to need to do is this. It's a two-step process because I can't solve for my x-intercepts without first factoring my situation here. All right, so I'm looking at the first one. This one's a little easier. Actually, we won't look at number 3. Let's skip down here to, let's just go to number 9. All right, now I see that there is no a value. I don't have a number with my x squared. That's going to make it easier for me because all I'm going to have to do now is figure out what numbers multiply together to give me a 27. That also add up to give me a negative 12. Okay, so with that here, and it may take you a while to find the combinations, but when I see a 3 times a 9, I know that 3 times 9 gives me a 27, but 3 plus 9 gives me a positive 12, right? Which means we're close, we're on the right track. What we're actually going to be able to do is this. I'm going to make them both negative, because negative 3 times the negative 9 still gives me a positive 27. Right, and negative 3 plus a negative 9 still gives me a negative 12. Okay, all right, so here's what my factored answer will look like. We know that x times x gives us our x squared. All right, so I'm going to have an x and a minus 3 and an x and a minus 9. All right, so that's what it looks like to factor the trinomial. So we have factored it now. What we're going to do is solve for our x-intercepts. Right now, to solve for our x-intercepts, that's us using the zero product property. And we take both of these pieces and set them equal to 0. So I'm going to have an x minus 3 is equal to a 0. And I'm going to have an x minus 9 is equal to a 0. Okay? This is helping us solve for our x-intercepts because when I'm looking for an x-intercept, I've gone nowhere in the y direction. I'm right on the x-axis. So that's a y coordinate of 0. So when I solve these using basic one-step equations, so add a 3, I'll see that one of my x-intercepts is at a 3. All right, when I'm solving this one out, I'll add a 9, and I'll add a 9 to get that x is equal to a 9. And those are the two spots where I would be crossing over the x-axis with this equation here. Right? And that's what it is. So you first have to factor, then you take your two pieces that you got from factoring, set them both equal to a 0, right? Remember that zero product property, and then you solve the equation to find your x. Okay? So that's how, like these first ones here are going to be the easier ones, right, where there's no number with our x squared. Some of these down here are going to have some numbers with our x squared, but we're still going to do the same process here, except just adding in one more column. Okay, so I'm trying to find what numbers multiply together to give me a 3, what numbers multiply together to give me a positive 21, that when I add all of those up, we're getting a negative 16 here. All right, now this is the part that people struggle with sometimes because they have to take their 1 times the 3, and they're going to have to find the right combination out of the 21. And now as you get better in these, you'll be able to spot them right away. But on here, we've got a 1 multiplied by 21, and I've got a 3 times a 7. Okay, so now I'm just trying to figure out how I can get all these to go together here to get a negative 16. All right, now this requires some thinking and some guessing and checking, right? Multiplying our different numbers by different things to see what we get. But now something that I recognize is that I'm going to need a negative 16, right? But I don't see any negative signs of this over here. So what that means is we're going to be looking kind of like on number 9. I'm going to need our double negative situation. All right, and I need double negative because negative times negative still gives me positive. But now I'm going to be generating some negatives to help me get this answer here. Okay, and I have found our combination. If I do a 3 times a negative 3, we'll get a negative 9. If I do a 1 times a negative 7, we'll get a negative 7. Negative 9 plus the negative 7 does give us that negative 16. All right, great. So when I go to set up my answer now, All right, here's what we got. I need a 1x and a 3x. So here's a 1x, here's a 3x, right? And these arrows tell us that they're multiplying, so they need to go opposite. This 1x needs to go opposite of this negative 7. So here's the 1x, here's our negative 7. Right, this 3 needs to go opposite of this negative 3 there. Okay, so there we go. I've got my trinomial factored, right, into its two different pieces. Now remember, to solve for these two x's, what we do is we take both of these pieces. We're trying to find out using the zero product property where they are both equal to 0. Right, so I'll take my x minus 3. I'll set it equal to a 0. Right, and we'll solve it. So I'll add a 3 to both sides. One of our x's is equal to a 3. All right, and then I'll take my other piece. So we've got a 3x minus a 7 here. All right, I'm going to set it equal to a 0, and then we'll solve. So I'll add a 7 onto both sides. So we'll get that 3x is equal to a positive 7. Now when I divide both sides by the 3, we'll get that our x is equal to here a 7 divided by 3. All right, those are our answers. Sometimes we're going to have the fractions in there, and that's all right. Sometimes it'll be whole numbers. Sometimes it will be fractions. All right, but there's a lot going on in these problems. We have to know how to factor them first. Then we have to take the two different factors, set them both up equal to 0. Right. Let's try one here off the back page for us and see how we're feeling about some of these. We'll take a look here at number 3. Okay, so I need to factor it first. So what numbers multiply together to give me a 9? What numbers multiply together to give me a negative 8? Where in some type of combination, these add to give us a 34. All right, so I know with 9, it's either going to be a 1 times a 9 or a 3 times a 3. With the 8 that's negative, I either need a 1 times an 8 or a 2 times a 4, where one of these takes on a negative sign. Right? It could go either way. Right? I just need one of them to be negative because positive times a negative gets me that negative answer. So now let's go through and let's try to find our combinations here. All right, so we're looking here. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes you'll just try some and figure it out and see if you can get it to work. I see this 1 and the 9 isn't going to work with our 1 and the 8 here. So maybe 9 times 4. Okay, so then I found it here. Right, because if I do 9 times a positive 4, right, 9 times positive 4 gets me a 36. All right, 9 times positive 4 gets me a 36. And then 1 times a negative with the 2. I'm putting the negative with the 2 here. 1 times negative 2 gets me a negative 2. 36 plus the negative 2 does indeed get me a 34. All right, so now I'm good to get my parentheses set up here. All right, so I need a 1x and a 9x. All right, the 1 was opposite, so the 1 needs to be opposite here of a minus 2. This 9 needs to be opposite here of a minus 4. Okay, so we have it factored, right? We did this first part. Now we just need to take this and solve for our x-intercept. So I'm going to take both pieces. I'm going to take my x minus 4 and set it equal to a 0. I'm going to take my 9x minus 2 and set it equal to a 0. Right? And solve for both equations. All right, well, x minus 4, I'm going to add a 4 to both sides. One of my x's is equal to a 4. All right, on this one here, we got the 9x minus 2 is equal to the 0. I'm going to add a 2 to both sides. We get that 9x is equal to a 2. When I divide both sides by our 9 here, we get that our x is equal to a 2 over 9. All right, and this is telling us the two spots where we will cross over our x-axis. All right, so there's a lot going on, so make sure to be working on these throughout the week. Otherwise, you might fall a little bit behind. Okay, so that covers some of the factoring and solving. Let's take a look at our graph here. All right, so let's start off and talk about what's easy first, and that's going to be our y-intercept. Remember that our y-intercept is always going to be 0, comma, whatever our c value is. All right, so it's always 0, comma, whatever our c value is. And here's our values, right? Here's our a, here's our b, here's our c. All right, so it looks like my c value is a positive 19. Right? So I know my y-intercept. It's not going to fit here on my graph, so that makes this a little sad. All right, but let's talk about how we can find the remaining information. To find this x-coordinate of our vertex, this is that negative b divided by 2a. Right? This negative b divided by 2a is going to tell us the x-coordinate of our vertex. Right? So I'm going to come down here into this open space and calculate it. Here's my negative b divided by 2 times my a. I'm going to plug in my values. My b value is a negative 12. Our a value is a positive 2. Right? So let's simplify. Negative 12 turns positive. 2 times 2 turns into a 4. 12 divided by 4 tells me a 3. So I know that the x-coordinate for my vertex is a 3. All right? And I'm also going to put that right there in the middle of our table. Okay, because what that's going to do for us is this. Now I know that I need 2 points lower. So I need a 3, 2, 1, and I need a 3, 4, 5. All right? And we know that since I put my vertex in the middle, I went 2 down and 2 up, that these values here will be the exact same, and that these values here will be the exact same. Okay? So you may be wondering, Mr. Cottle, how do I find these different y values? I don't even know how to find the y value for my vertex. Remember, to find y values, right? What we do is we use our equation, right? So, but everywhere that I have an x, I'm going to plug in our numbers. Okay? So to find our y values, plug in the x coordinate. All right, so what I'll be doing is taking my equation. So it is a 2x squared, so I'm going to leave a spot for my x, minus a 12x, and then plus a 19. All right, sorry, I forgot to leave a spot here for my x. All right, so what we'll be doing is plugging in these different values. So to find this y coordinate right here, I'd plug in a 3, right, and I'd calculate what all this gives me, and that would tell me that spot right there. So let's just see this one example, and then you should be able to carry over and do the other ones. All right, so a 3 squared gives me a 9. 9 times this 2 gives us an 18. Negative 12 times a positive 3 gives me a minus 36. And then we have that plus 19 there. Okay? Then you put these three numbers together in any order that you want. So 18 minus 36, that's going to give me a negative 18. All right, so I put those two together. And then I still have that plus a 19. And negative 18 plus the 19 is going to take me to a 1. All right, so there's our vertex. You can get it graphed. You can go over 3 and up 1 there. Now, to find these other values, we're going to take our equation. But everywhere that you have an x, you will plug in what you need. Right? So maybe you can plug in the 1 into both of these spots. And it'll tell you your y coordinate that goes there and there. All right, then you can plug in your 2 into your equation, calculate it, and it'll tell you the y coordinate that you get there and there. All right, so this homework it looks small because it's just a front and the back. But remember that these problems take a little bit of time with the factoring and the solving. You can see how much work there is for each problem. Make sure that we're working on this throughout the week.